Okay, guys, thanks for attending today. This is our third training session that we're doing a webinar for today, and our topic is going to be on electronic medical records or clinical documentation. So what we're kind of doing with these sessions, it's really the first time we've run them just to kind of test them out to see who would be interested in attending and seeing them. I'm just kind of taking you through a typical training session that I would normally take a brand new clinic through. Your choices and options for what you have available to you for clinical documentation is what we're going to focus on today's session. And I do have the latest version of the software. My system is on version 536. So for those of you that don't know how to upgrade yourself or where these upgrades or when an upgrade is available to you or how you get notified, you can actually keep up to date with that yourself when you're logged into Practice Perfect. I'm just going to turn on a little highlighter here. Under the Help menu at the top of your screen, that's a drop down. So if you choose in the Help menu, Recent Notes or Release Notes, that will actually pop up a link on our website. And then you can keep up to date with all the latest. Let me go there for you. You can keep up to date with all the latest updates that are available. So it just brings you to a link on our website, and then it kind of lists the version that was released and on the date it was released. And if you click on those, it'll actually tell you some of the new features or new functions or new reports that are available within that release. You certainly don't have to update every single time they release something. As you can see, something's happening pretty much every month or every 2 months. You can kind of read along, and if you're waiting for something to become available, certainly do the upgrade at that point. If there's an industry change, we're always going to have an upgrade or an update for that. And then of course you can update or upgrade at that point. If you need any help at all, if you're nervous, if you've never done it yourself, you're not sure what to do to actually upgrade, you're just going to reach out to the support team and they will hop on the screen and help you through that upgrade. Okay, so I'm on version 536, so I'm going to show you a few new things that are also available to you, but our focus today really is clinical documentation, what our options are, and how we do certain things. So let's get started. So typically when I train for clinical documentation, I use the scheduler in the background as my starting point. Not that you need the scheduler to do any kind of documentation, but I use the scheduler almost like a to-do list. So if we look at our scheduler for this therapist on Wednesday, January the 22nd, and we kind of scroll our eyes down the list, those are all the people that we're going to need to do documentation on based on whether they showed up, canceled, or no-showed. So it's like a to-do list. This guy here that has arrived for his appointment, we're definitely going to want to make sure we have either a clinical SOAP note, a daily note, an eval, re-eval, something. For this guy here who has no-showed, Mr. Copay Split, we have to decide at the clinic level, do we still do a document on a patient who cancels or no-show? Do we still complete a SOAP note, but all it says is that they canceled or no-show? That's kind of an option. The system is going to be quite concerned. It's going to try to remind you if you don't have any clinical documentation, especially on people arriving or completing for their appointments. It's going to be a little bit more flexible. It's not going to care too much if you don't have a document on somebody canceling, no-showing, or rebooking. Okay, so remember that your function bar determines all the little things that you can do. So when you're in the scheduler, you tend to have the biggest function bar available to you. And the functions we're going to focus on are kind of in the middle of that function bar. So we're going to talk about some clinical documentation options in there and something called the contact log. And the contact log on a patient is always available with this little phone icon. And again, you don't need to be in the scheduler to see that little phone. You can be anywhere in the system. As long as you're working on that patient, you can be in their profile, you can be looking at a list of patients. That little phone is always available on the function bar, and it's called a contact log. So when you click the contact log, this little area was meant to record conversations, things potentially that we have to do or list on this patient that we don't necessarily want officially in a clinical note. Green plus on your function bar would always add a new one, or if you have existing contact logs and you're trying to update them, you would just do a flag and an edit. But the purpose of a contact log is to be able to record a category for your note or your log, and you can make up those categories. You can control those in housekeeping, and then describe the situation. So in my scenario here, I'm talking about a phone call with a physician. We're talking about return to work full-time with the client, and we have to do something in the future. We have to call back in 2 weeks with a status update. So I can assign this to a specific user, or I can leave it wide open. And I can also assign what's called a follow-up date. It's like a reminder date. Something has to be completed by this date. And then to further that, I can have an actual reminder pop up on my screen with that little tick box. Or if I don't like the whole pop-ups, if I have 50 things I'm going to be putting due on February 1st, maybe that's annoying to have 50 pop-ups, so I might not tick that box. But instead, I'll run a report by this date. So that report comes from the reporting drop-down list, and it's under task and clinical category. And it's the first report called your contact log follow-up. And that report is designed to filter. So typically your first filter would be the date range. I don't want to see everything I have to do for the year, but I'd like to see everything I have to do by February the 1st. And then from there, you may decide to filter more by category. You may say, well, I don't want to see all of my to-dos or all of my contact logs, but I do want to see just my physician calls. Or I don't want to see, maybe I don't have authority to see everybody else's, but I don't want to see everybody else's. I just want to see my stuff that's on the list, or my particular username. And then the system will give you a list of those things that have to be completed with all your notes. So this is the one I just did down here for Mr. Test Self-Pay. I've called Dr. Samuel. We're talking about a return to work, and I have to call back in 2 weeks. It's showing up because I said, show me everything that's due by February 1st. Okay. And then from there, you typically take the items on your list, go back to your client, go back to the contact log, the little phone icon, and then update your log. Update, talk to Dr. Smith, everything's great. And that might start the cycle again. You might assign it to somebody else. You might assign it to the same person. You might put a different follow-up date to it and start the whole process again. Or you might be marking this as what's called a completed log. And it just means it stays here forever on the list. It no longer shows up on your reports anymore. It's marked as a completed log. And for these contact logs, you can use them for pretty much anything you want because you can make up different categories in housekeeping. You can use these for administrative notes, clinical notes. I've got to call the doctor notes. Every time you send a fax, we're going to look at that. You can have that recorded in the contact log. And you can actually print these contact logs just like any other clinical note in the software. You can flag the ones you like, send it to the printer, and then print from there. Okay. So those are contact logs. We're going to go back to the scheduler. So just a quick reminder, as a clinician, sometimes doing clinical documentation, sometimes the notes or the visuals that are available to you in the scheduler are important for you as well. So sometimes at the top of the screen, there's information up there regarding the funding limits. Sometimes you have a payer that has a certain number of visits or units or a dollar value that you're allowed to be billing towards. Sometimes you need to know that as a clinical staff member. You have to know when you're going to ask for the next authorization or when you're running out of funding. And then on the bottom left-hand side of the screen in blue, that is also some more patient key information over there as well. Sometimes if you have to contact the client, there's going to be phone numbers listed, how many future visits they have is listed there, the groups they're in, therapists they're connected to, all that kind of good stuff is always following the patient on the left-hand side as well. And that's not just in the scheduler, by the way, that kind of follows you everywhere in the system. So you always have that blue section at the top, blue section at the bottom left. So now let's get into some of the clinical documents that are available to you. And again, I like to use the scheduler to get started with, but you do not have to do that. But I like to use the scheduler because it feeds a lot of information into my document. If I'm on the appointment for January the 22nd for Mr. Private Pay, that's going to feed that information back to the document for me. I don't have to pick a date. It's going to assume January 22nd. So up in the middle of your function bar, I'm going to highlight these for you. There are 2 blue file folders and then 2 pieces of paper. So those are the icons we're going to focus on for just a moment. The 2 blue file folders are your daily clinical notes. They have lots of different nicknames: daily SOAP notes, daily clinical notes, daily progress notes. Anything that's kind of your daily format is what you find as the blue file folder icon. Anything else, which we will get to, like an eval, a re-eval, a discharge, something you're attaching to the client, x-ray results, any other type of document that's not your daily note typically is found separately under the icon that looks like 2 pieces of paper, and that's called activities by document. So we're going to focus on the daily note first for no other reason other than you do daily notes 9 times out of 10 more times than you do an eval or a re-eval or a discharge. But realistically, the first thing you would do on a patient when you're first assessing them would probably be the eval. So the blue file folders at the top of the screen, there's 2 just slightly different looking icons. The one on the left that I'm hovering over right now, actually I'll highlight that for you, that is show me all the clinical daily notes I already have on this patient, or that I've started on this patient. So that's like the list of all the clinical notes, daily notes available for that patient. The one next to it on the right with the green plus sign, that's going to create you, it's a shortcut to quickly go to the note for today's appointment or the appointment that you're on. So 9 times out of 10, you're choosing the one with the green plus sign if you're using the scheduler. You're saying create the note for that appointment. The note itself, to start with, without making any setting changes, has an SOAP section to it. So you have your subjective, objective assessment, and plan. There are a ton of settings that you can change if you have authority under the settings drop-down, and then customize your progress notes and documentation. Now, some of these will appear new to you if you're on 536. There's a whole whack of new updates available in the latest updates in the system. So my focus is down here, and my 4 sections are coming from this little area on the left right here: subjective, objective, assessment, and plan. You could change the names of those 4 sections if you need to. Just type something different here on the right. I do warn you, if you were in my first or second training session, any setting in our software that is a black font will affect all the usernames and passwords using Practice Perfect. It's called a global setting. So because that's a black font, it will actually affect all of your notes, all of your usernames and passwords. It's not something that you can do per username and password. If your option change above here is in a blue font, and I've written all over the screen, let me just erase some of those. If you have a blue font, then it means it will only affect you and this username and password available. Okay. On the right-hand side, I just want to point out a couple of other options for you, especially to do with clinical daily notes, daily SOAP notes. The bring forward option, if you tick that little box, and that's done per username and password, that means it will bring forward whatever you wrote in your last SOAP note to tomorrow SOAP notes. When you open up your note tomorrow, all your sections will already have the writing that you wrote yesterday. That's what a bring forward means. Okay, and that was my option on the screen. Whatever I wrote yesterday is already typed here, and then I can modify it from there. So there's 4 basic ways to add information into these different sections. Your option 1 is to use the bring forward. Option 2 is always a manual type. You can just place your cursor and start typing words. That's always an option. Option 3 is the drop down called copy and paste. And your copy and paste option will show you the previous notes section by section. So this is showing me all the previous notes I've written on this patient, subjective section only, and I can pick and choose which ones I'd like to copy from. So I'm going to say I want to copy from that one, move down to my objective. That'll show me all the past objective sections I've written on this patient, and I would pick and choose which ones I want to copy from there. On the right-hand side of the screen is your fourth option, and that's called quick phrasing. So quick phrasing is like telling the system to remember words, remember sentences or phrases. We're going to use those over and over again, and they follow you to every document within Practice Perfect. So usually the words on the right are not patient specific. So if you highlight something on your screen, a single word, a paragraph, a whole sentence, you'll get the green plus sign that lights up on the right. So you're adding those words on the right-hand side in memory. And you typically make up a description for those words. You place them into a category that already exists, or you make up your own category. And based on your username and password and what restrictions you have, you can actually decide whether these phrases or sentences or categories are available to all usernames and passwords, or they're restricted to my own username and password. Okay. And then from there, the words that you've copied are going to be in the middle section. You can always modify that. But in a moment, this is going to be stored on the right-hand side. If we tell the system, type out that description, it'll just physically type all these words in the center into my document. If your clinic is also, if your therapists at your clinic are also responsible for recording the services that were rendered to the patient, if they are the ones that are supposed to fill out the billing sheet or tell you the services with units and time, you can do a little bit of an advanced feature when you're setting up these quick phrases, and you can associate fees to the words. So if your sentence above was talking about providing services to a patient for 20 minutes, you could say, well, that should prompt me that I want to bill, let's say, 2 units of 97110. So the words that you're typing can just be words that are in memory and typed for you. Those words can also have a connection to fee codes with units. Okay. How you use these on the right-hand side of the screen, if you're on the full desktop version, which I'm showing right now, you just simply find your category on the right, expand it, find a description, and when you double click on the description, it'll just simply type those words for you into your document. If you're on the web-based version of this particular option, instead of double clicking on your quick phrasing, you'll just simply click and slide it to the left. Okay, so that's called the narrative part of our note, just trying to get the words into these sections as quickly as possible. We can either start with yesterday's note automatically, that's called a bring forward. We can always free type whenever we need to. We can also use a manual selection, copy and paste from previous notes, section by section, and or a combination of quick phrasing on the right. Okay. So in addition to that, we also have some other things called add-ons. They're just little icons appearing at the top of your function bar. And some of the little add-ons we're going to talk about today may or may not be new for you. So one little icon I'll point out, it's not lit up right now, but it's a little lock. And sometimes what happens is if 2 separate usernames and passwords are trying to access the same note on the same patient for the same day at the same time, one of the versions of those notes has to be what's called blocked. And it means, sorry, you can't edit or look at this note because somebody else is looking at the note. If you want to unlock the note, basically log the other person out of looking at this, you can click this little lock icon, and it basically logs the other person out so that you can log in and edit the note. You just want to be careful. It's a feature because a lot of times we had people who had the note open on their screen, perhaps walked away, forgot that it was on their screen. Hours later, it still looks like they're looking at the note and it's locked and nobody else can get into it and see it. So this little button kind of forces them out. The next little icon that we'll talk about is the client signature. This is an option, looks like a tiny little pen icon. And this is handy if you do want the patient to co-sign, or if you're treating kiddies and you need the parents to sign those notes. You just pass the tablet over to the parent, click that little pen icon, give them a stylus. They can use their finger as well, and they just sign the note, and their note is recorded with a signature. The next little icon looks like a body chart, looks like a tiny little character. And a body chart is optional for recording areas on the body where you number them and then talk about those areas. So every time you point and click, you get a number, and that number turns green. When the number is green, you're indicating that this is the injury area that you're trying to reference right now, and then you just simply answer the questions or comment below. So every time you click, your number turns green, you fill in the blanks and comment on that area. Okay. You'll notice that all of your add-ons that I'm pointing to appear like a pop-up on your screen. We don't really make you scroll through the note to see these. They kind of pop up while you're writing the note. We will look at a finished version of the note so you can see where this is included, but your pop-ups, your add-ons will always appear like this. Okay. The last couple of icons I really want to focus on for now are these goal icons and then the treatment icon. So the goals are always entered the same way in our software with these two little symbols that look like targets, little bullseyes. And they kind of work like the blue file folder. The one that's on the left is going to show you all the notes with all the goals that you've ever entered on this patient. Typically, you're trying to use the one with the green plus sign. That's going to bring you to the current list of goals, any goals that you've already talked about. And they bring forward automatically from one note to the next. So the goals that I wrote and comment on yesterday are the goals that I begin with today and then I comment on. And then those move forward to tomorrow, I comment on, and then so on and so forth. So if this is completely blank, then you would be filling this out for the first time. Green plus sign would activate all of the goals that you have available to you. And this particular goal bank that we reference as is coming from housekeeping. You have control over what shows up in the bank, what you want to enter into the bank. The purpose of having a bank of goals or a list of goals to choose from is so that you don't have to do hopefully as much typing as you normally would if you were going to free type the whole thing. The bank of goals does that for you. So you choose from the bank, and then based on that goal, it'll type the description for you into the document. So green plus sign activates the list, you pick from the list, and then it types the description. If from there, though, you want to customize that description, you want to change a little bit based on this patient's needs, you just simply highlight whatever it is you want to change, type over top of it, or highlight the whole sentence and just do a free type of whatever you'd like to type in there. So you can always customize it once you bring over that phrase. Okay. The fields to the right of that are optional. The system can keep track of 3 different percentages. We can keep track of the target that you're trying to hit on your goal, where you were last time you documented on this patient versus where you are today. And typically where you are today with therapeutic intervention comments is what's changing most often. The goal on the left might be a long-term goal that's going to be the same goal for the next year that we're working with this patient or 6 months. And the comments are every time we treat them, every time there's a change or progress on that goal. We can track whether the goal is long-term or short-term. And if you've enabled a setting at your clinic where you must comment on your goals daily, then that little tick box indicates that you're commenting on today's note. That would count as your requirement for commenting today. Okay. The bottom section of your goal screen can also record a score for a test. So I'll clarify, this is not the actual test that you're attaching here. It's referencing that you provided a test on the patient today with a score next to it. So green plus sign would activate your list again, and your list comes from housekeeping. You can decide what tests are going to be listed. and then you pick the name of the test, and then on the right-hand side, you enter a score. Okay, and then okay to get out of that screen. The last component of your note sometimes before you sign it are the services that you rendered the patient. Now, we talked a little bit earlier about having the words in our document on the right-hand side in quick phrasing automatically suggest that we bill certain units in time. But no matter whether those words are suggesting or whether we're going to tell the system every single time exactly what we did without the system helping us, if your clinic has the therapists that are responsible for entering the services, at some point before they sign their note, they're going to be clicking on this little white hand, usually from within the note itself. And that little white hand is the entry for all treatments and assessments. It's also called a billing sheet, a Superbill. It's just an electronic version of a Superbill that allows therapists to record services. So typically, if it's the therapist's responsibility, they just start at the top and they work their way down. They just confirm, is this the name of the therapist actually treating the patient that day? If that therapist is not able to bill on their own, then a billing provider would mean the supervisor name, the name that will appear on the invoice. And then from there, if nothing is suggested in this form so far, green plus sign would activate the list. And again, you control that list in housekeeping. And you select from your services available. So in my example, I'm going to say I did a Therex with my client today for 2 units, and I might be required to enter units in time. Some of our clinics also require the therapist to indicate the actual location of service. Sometimes things are happening in home, in office, in school. Okay. For every treatment and assessment code entered with units in time, there's also a need to reference a diagnostic code. Usually that is entered sometimes when you're setting up the patient or when you've already done the eval or re-eval, but in the event nothing has been recorded on that patient yet, and you're dealing with an insurance patient, you might have to click this little bar appearing on the bottom right, green plus to activate the list, and again, that list comes from housekeeping. And then you would be selecting all the different diagnostic codes related to the patient. Okay. And you can have obviously more than one. Those codes, now that you connect them to a patient, will always follow that patient around. You do have to point to the ones that are applicable. So I'm saying my 97110, my Therex for 2 units, 20 minutes, is for this ICD-10 code below. And I could repeat the process. If I have more than one code, I just complete the steps again. Green plus sign to activate. I can also type in my numbers or my descriptions. I confirm the units and time spending with my client, maybe location, and then I confirm which diagnostic codes I'm treating the patient for as well. Okay. The OK button at the bottom right is like signing off on the billing sheet. Once the therapist clicks OK, it's like putting their initial on that billable sheet. It's going to the biller next to correct it, fix it up, send it out for billing. So the therapist can look at it again by clicking on the hand, but they cannot edit anything that they've okayed. I'm clicking, I don't know if you can hear my mouse or keyboard, nothing's happening. They can add brand new services that were never there before, but they cannot edit, in theory, the services they've okayed. The proper procedure would be to go to the biller and say, whoops, I made a mistake on my 97110, I meant that to be 3 units. Okay, so all the components put all together, we have the narrative part of the note, we possibly have a signature from the patient, we have a body chart potentially, we have goals that we're working on or updating for our patient, and then we have services rendered. So I'm going to click the printer icon at the moment. On purpose, I haven't signed this note just yet. I'm just going to have a look at it. Before you print or preview anything in the system, SOAP notes, clinical daily notes, have a ton of different options. So I'm just leaving this up on the screen for you for a moment to show you. All these little tick boxes are options for things that you can include or exclude off of your printed version, the version that goes to the outside world. I've pretty much asked for everything. So I'm going to do a little preview there. And my note appears now as it will go to the outside world. So typically you have your clinic information at the top left, patient information would follow, then your 4 sections, subjective, objective, assessment, and plan, services rendered, counting units and time. And I'm just going to point out, because I've tracked units and I've recorded minutes against those units, it's also calculating up top here the total duration spent with the patient one-on-one, if that's a requirement for your Medicaid, Medicare. Goals are usually on the second page, followed by test results if you've asked for those, body charts, and then your signatures will appear below. Okay. So for those of you that have opted in for the fax option within Practice Perfect, a cool little function, before you're actually printing or previewing these, you can actually select Practice Perfect Fax, and you can fill out a fact sheet, see all the contacts available for that patient, and directly fax out to that contact from Practice Perfect. Okay. Okay, so the daily note itself, you can come in and out of here as often as you need to before you decide to sign this note. Practice Perfect, in theory, has no timeline as to when you have to sign this note, but in your clinic, you probably do. You probably have maybe a 24 or 48-hour timeline before you have to get all your notes and treatments and assessments entered. So you can come in and out of here as much as you need. At some point, the note status has to be changed. So the status is always incomplete until we manually make a selection to eventually complete it and signed. And then we have to okay this and say, yes, we're ready to sign this note. If you are a therapist that you are unable to sign your own note, in that drop down, you will likely only be able to see complete but unsigned, and it's only a supervisor that can come along, append their name above as the co-provider, and then they would be able to co-sign or sign the note completely. So that would have 2 different signatures. Okay. And if we go back to the scheduler where we started from today, some new little symbols are showing up on the scheduler visually. So remember, all these little pictures are kind of telling us a story in the scheduler. So from a therapist perspective, if you are the one that is responsible for recording treatments and assessments, that would be the little white hand. Once the little white hand shows up on the appointment, that's the visual that treatments and assessments, the billing sheet was signed on that date for that patient. There is some kind of treatment or assessment recorded. The blue file folder showing up on your note indicates that a daily clinical SOAP note was signed by that therapist on that date for that patient for the incident that we scheduled them for. So if somebody is not showing a little blue file folder, that just indicates the note may have been started. We may be in the middle of writing it. We may not have even been started at this point, but the note definitely has not been signed yet. So in theory, you always want that little hand, the little blue file folder, or the 2 pieces of paper if we're doing an eval or re-eval on people arriving or completing. Okay. And the system does have, other than that visual of looking for the missing blue file folder on the appointments, we do have reports that can point that out as well. So under the reports drop-down list, and then under the task and clinical section, again, today we looked at the contact log earlier. There's another one called your document and progress note status report. And you can ask the system for a date range or a single day. Show me something like all the notes that are still incomplete by this one therapist. And then that would give us a list of all the notes that still need to be complete. Okay. Okay, so that's the daily note. Why we spend so much time talking about the options within the daily note is because now all the other options for us, evals, re-evals, discharges, anything else we're going to do in Practice Perfect will work and complete themselves just like a SOAP note. So now we're going to move on to all the other types of options you have available, and that's the 2 pieces of paper icon. And that's officially called the patient's activities by document section. Okay, all the other types of documents in theory that are not SOAP notes. So you have a few options in here for adding documents. So we'll talk about the first option appearing on your function bar. Looks like a little scanner button. And that little scanner button is nicknamed or called a quick scan. So a quick scan is looking for a scanner on your network, and it will scan a one-page document and save it to the patient's chart as a picture. So it's just a one-page scan. This is not the option you choose for a multiple-page scan. Okay, so I'll just point that out again. That's called a quick scan. So you would say quick scan, put something in the printer, launch the scanner. It would scan that one page and save it right to the patient's chart as an image. Okay. The next couple of options you have available to you are available in this little drop down with the green plus sign called New Document. And there's 4 or 5 different things you can add in here. The options that come with the system initially, the top section contains templates that are already pre-built or pre-wired into the system. They give you a couple of evals, a reeval, and a discharge. The second option is to import a document, and we're going to talk about all these. You can grab something from your computer, basically. In fact, I have one here. You can grab something from your computer and list it as a document on the patient's chart. So my little highlighter here, I'm showing I have a Word document that I've grabbed from my computer and listed it as a document on this patient's chart. I also have the option under the Help menu to download some standardized tests to my computer only. So you have to do that computer by computer. And then the fourth option is to build your own templates. If the templates above just don't work for you, you have full authority, full option to build your own templates. So let's talk about these quickly. So under the drop-down list, if we look at the ones that come with the software, the first one, PTOT eval, it's already sort of pre-built for us. It doesn't really provide a whole lot of options for going custom. I can change the title. I can call this officially whatever I want by typing in the title bar at the top. I can officially categorize this as whatever type of document I want it to be. Although it was designed as an assessment, I could say, well, this counts as my daily note today. It counts as my flow sheet today. I can kind of choose a different option. But from there, my only options are really fill in my fields or leave them blank. If I do choose to fill in a field, it works the same way as the SOAP note. You always have the option to free type. On the right-hand side, I have my quick phrasing that has followed me around. I just simply find my category, double-click on my description, it'll type those words. But if I decide to leave a few of these fields blank, I just don't like this field, I don't like that drop-down, and I decide to leave it blank, for these pre-built options, when you get to the printed version, the blank sections just won't show up. We don't include those on the printed version. Okay, so you can kind of fill in what you want, leave what you want blank. The options on your function bar, though, are exactly the same as your SOAP note. You have your patient signature, you have your body chart, you're going to fill out your goals exactly the same way. If you're responsible for entering treatments and assessments, you have your billing sheet or Superbill that you would fill out the same way. And then from there, you sign your note exactly the same way as well with a co-signature if you need one. So from that perspective, it works exactly the same. You can come in and out of here as much as you need, go back and forth as scheduler, work on other patients, and at some point, you're going to come back and mark the note as completed and signed, where your signature officially is appended to the document on the last page, and you can no longer edit the document. Okay. If you go back to the scheduler, the visual on your scheduler would be the 2 pieces of paper. So when the 2 pieces of paper icon shows up on your scheduled appointment, that indicates that you have completed or uploaded some type of assessment or reassessment or discharge, an official document that's not a SOAP note. So typically you don't, it depends on your location though, whatever you decide to do documentation wise, but typically you don't need both of those icons on your appointment. You need one or the other. You're either doing a SOAP note or you're doing an eval, reeval, discharge, something along those lines. Okay. And that little icon, by the way, if you have authority, under the housekeeping area, under the clinical section for document types, you can tell the system, you can redefine what those little icons mean. So my description as an example is assessment. When I complete or upload a document that I'm saying counts as an assessment, if I follow that to the right, I'm saying show the document icon when that happens, show the 2 pieces of paper icon. When I upload an exercise flow sheet, if we follow that to the right, I'm saying don't show any icon at all. I don't want that to count as anything official. When I do a daily SOAP note, if I follow to the right, I'm saying show the progress note icon, which is the blue file folder. So you can actually tell the system to define what those little icons typically mean. What I'm showing you today is what the default is. Okay, so back onto my fake Mr. Private Patient, I'm going to go back into activities by document. We've talked about the quick backs. We've talked about the pre-built options. The next option will be a download. And the download comes from your help drop-down list under integrated forms. So that will take you to a link on our website, and you download these tests or available forms per computer. And if you need help, of course, support can help you do that. And you end up with something like this, a document that you then fill out and attach to a patient's chart. So this is a Word document that I've done that on. I'm going to double click and say that I want to view or edit this document, and you'll notice that Word is opening up in the background. So technically I'm not in Practice Perfect right now, I'm in Word. Practice Perfect is running in the background. So I can do in Word whatever Word will let me do. I have all this functionality at the top of the screen here available in Microsoft Word. I can tick boxes, I can fill in fields, I can write on my document like Microsoft Word. The only disadvantage really is that we don't have the functionality of Practice Perfect. There is no quick phrase, there is no copy and paste feature from Practice Perfect section by section. There's no little white hand to record service, but on the flip side, it's Microsoft Word. I have all the functionality I need to do and fill out a document in Microsoft Word. Okay, so once you complete that, once you tick a few boxes or fill out this form and you exit out of Word, it will always ask if you want to save. You want to say yes. Back in Practice Perfect, you always want to do what's called a re-import. It's reattaching it to the patient's chart with those changes. Okay. And then the last option is to go custom. If those templates just don't work for us, you don't like the functionality of Word, you want to have all the functionality of Practice Perfect, then you build your own document. Now, this part takes a little bit more than a 5-minute demo. So there are some great little videos that I can show you where those are. I have some written instructions I can send you. Support can help you through that when you have any questions along the way for sure. But it comes from housekeeping. So housekeeping has a section called Customize Documents, and you basically build it from scratch. And it starts with fields. Fields is where all of your work comes from. So every single little tick box, every little box where you want somebody to type something, every little box where you want somebody to pick from a date range, that's called a field. And you have to design every single field. You have to tell the system, what is this field called? What is this field going to do? Are there characters that are already going to pre-populate? Or if it's a drop-down, what am I providing the user to be able to select from? How big is it? Is it bold? Is it italicized? Underline. So you have to spend a little bit of time and build the fields. The fields, then you group them into sections. So you might decide you're going to have a section called patient information, and it has 20 of the fields you've designed. And you might even decide to build a table out of all those fields. The document that you eventually get to build and name, so we're going to build a shoulder evaluation, we're going to fill that document with all of our sections and tables. Okay, and when that's done, when you have built the document, it will show up in the bottom of the list automatically, whoops, sorry, that was fast, for everybody to see and use. Okay, so I've built this little sad little document here called test document. It's available on every computer automatically on every patient for everybody to use. And when you click on that document, it now is a Practice Perfect document. So it has all the functionality of Practice Perfect. My function bar is exactly the same as a SOAP note or any other eval, re-eval system. But I have technically designed this form. I've given the form these boxes. I want to be able to type in here. I have my quick phrasing on the right that'll help me do the typing for me. I have tick boxes. I have date fields. I have drop downs. I just had to design it, that's all. And then eventually you're going to sign the form like normal. You're going to change that status to completed and signed. If you have accounting as an assessment, it'll throw the 2 pieces of paper icon onto your scheduled appointment like all the other ones. Okay. So for the faxing option, I do see a question listed below. For the faxing option, yes, you can actually fax all these at the same time. If you're in activities by document right now, and I'm flagging a whole bunch of documents, and those are kind of a mix of documents. I have a Word item, I have a evaluation, I have a custom built template in there, and I send those to the printer icon, and I choose let's fax those out. I can actually fax them all at the same time, which is really nice, over to my contact. So that little add-on feature, the fax feature, if you guys want any information on that, just give me a shout out after the session today, and I'll make sure that Matt gives you a call and talks to you about the faxing option, but it's pretty cool. Okay. For those of you that do need assistance along the way or are interested in some of the things we talked about today, remember that when you're logged into the full desktop version, you can go to the Help drop-down list in the first section About, so Help and About, and you get all your assistance here. So the support has an email address here. You can shout out, ask for anything at all that you need assistance with. And then there's a Learning Center link as well, and that'll take you to the website that lists all of our different videos available. So depending on which version, let's go to the US version, all the webinars that we're doing right now are being recorded, and you'll see them eventually uploaded here in the webinar section. But we also have some little videos that we've talked about today under the documentation section. How to build a document. There's step-by-step how to do a custom document, part 1 and 2. What's a SOAP note? How do you fill out goals with the daily note? All those kinds of things have a nice little video to them. Okay. Okay, guys, so what I'm going to do now is going to open up the microphones for everybody. So if you do have any questions, certainly feel free to shout out to me, or you can also type below. You can also shoot me an email afterwards if you think of something afterwards that you wanted to know. But otherwise, that is all that I have to show you today. Thanks for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone. Take care. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, bye.
Okay.
Bye.
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 Well.